Like, watch this. Take these guys off of here real quick. And then if I tap this, boom. It's like a little backlighting. I like it. I don't know if you like it, but it's there. What makes Batman who he is? Is it for the quest of vengeance and justice against the criminals of Gotham? Is it the big money of Bruce Wayne that allows him to pay for all of his weird little bat gadgets and pay off all the destruction that he causes? Or is it the mythological legend that he builds upon Gotham as this dark shadow in the night? Well, whatever you think makes Batman, well, you know, Batman. My question is, what makes absolute Batman a Batman? Because in my opinion, and it's just my opinion by the way, so don't think this is like a overarching thing of like everyone should believe this. No, this is just what I believe. I think absolute Batman isn't really a Batman. Not like in story. In story, he still holds the name of a Batman, but I mean, like, just, he doesn't really feel like a Batman at all. His vibes are wrong, his actions feel wrong as a Batman. It's off, for me, at least. When Absolute Batman came out and I first saw his design, I'll admit, I completely ignored the series. I looked at it and I thought, this is going to be nothing like the Batman that I am used to, so I'm not going to even bother with it. Admittedly, his design is badass. He's built like a tank. He's got these big spikes on his back. He's got this big chest symbol. You know, I thought it did look cool. It just didn't look like Batman. Of course, I do expect Batman to be more built, of course, having a giant shoulder span, and, you know, it helps build the shadowy figure with his cape over him, but, you know, I at least expect him to be able to walk through a doorway without having to, you know, shimmy sideways. So seeing this Batman, who in the comics is literally canonically 6'9" and weighs about 421 pounds, walking around, it made me go, that guy cannot sneak up on anything or anyone. You could hear that dude sneeze from a block away, probably, with how big his lung capacity is. You get hit by normal Batman, and you'd be like, oh, that's rough. I might need to go see a doctor. I might have broken something. You get hit by absolute Batman, bones pointing out of your body. You're like, I need the ER. And of course, I'm saying all these things as if I don't like it. And obviously, at that point in time, I didn't really like it. It didn't really have an appeal to me. But then I saw snippets from the comics online with the dump truck and the Killer Croc design, and as of more recently, the Joker cover that's released for the upcoming issue. So I would be lying if I said I wasn't interested at the moment. I am most definitely interested. And so I read everything. I read all of the comic books of the Absolute Batman, just Absolute Batman, that were available. Of course, I am aware that there is a new issue coming out in November on the 12th, but I've already written this whole video, and I wasn't aware of that until after I had finished reading everything, so yeah. And of course, after reading the whole thing, I now better understand this depiction of Batman and all that, but I would still stand by the opinion. I still don't think that he's Batman. First, I want to tell you what I was expecting from the comic books before I even read them. When I first saw just even the smallest snippet from it, I imagined that this Bruce Wayne was going to be a much more violent Batman, which I was actually correct about. It was very, very on the point. And then there was also the idea that I had thought that he had both of his parents offed, and that because of that, he was orphaned but no longer had access to his family wealth for some reason. He didn't have an Alfred, and so he got raised on the streets, maybe adopted, and that's why he became much more ruthless, is because he grew up around the streets and he understood that you don't have to hold back on some of these people sometimes. And that was like the most that I really thought about it. I didn't really think too much about anything else afterwards. Some of my points were still accurate, but I was very wrong about the whole parent thing. Secondly, I want to establish a basis for a Bruce Wayne / Batman to compare to the absolute version of himself. And so instead of just picking one specific one, because some people will disagree that being a base Batman, I'm just going to make one from my own memory and what I like about Batman. So obviously Batman will always have these body shapes and suit designs. So literally just anything within the genre of what this looks. Slight shape changes and color changes, it's almost consistent with all its suits. Bruce Wayne, billionaire playboy, you know, he gets drunk at parties and he's the CEO of Wayne Enterprises. And that's just a mask, obviously, for Batman. Now, Batman, he started off his career as a much more ruthless protector, but over time he would slowly become more soft as he gains more Robins, more family members, And, he lets love into his life. Of course, he's still Batman, but, he's much less intimidating. Of course, origin-wise, Bruce is a boy who grows up happily in Gotham with his two very rich parents who get their money from both their Wayne family fortune as well as just Wayne Enterprises. Of course, Bruce's father, Thomas Wayne, is a doctor, and that's how he usually puts more money into the Wayne family fortune, because that's a big paying job. And then I'm not really sure about his mother's job. It's fluctuating. Sometimes she just stays at home and looks after him. Sometimes she's also doing other stuff. But then the family always seems to get into some criminal enterprise, be it fully well on their decision or someone's forced them to get into it. And of course, he always has Alfred, a little butler that he can have as he grows up and more or less raises him and becomes his own father figure. But then his parents both get butchered in Crime Alley after watching a movie called Zorro. And of course, it's a little weird. I'm still a little peeved that out of all the decisions you could have picked to go down any alley in Gotham, you go, yeah, that one. Yeah, Crime Alley. Let's take a shortcut through Crime Alley. Why? Yeah, hold on. Let me just take a shortcut. I'm going to go through the... we could either go through Stabbing Street, or alternatively, it's a bit of a longer walk, but we can go through Pleasant Lane. Now, let's go through Stab Street. Why? You live in Gotham, very renowned for its crime rate. Of course, after his parents' death, he slowly trains with Alfred to become what he would call Batman. And of course, it's not just Alfred. At I want to say, older teenage, young adult, maybe a little bit younger than that age, he went out and trained globally, learning more about mixed martial arts. He learned how to deal with pain. There's a lot of stuff he learned how to do as he traveled the world. And then he came back to Gotham with all this knowledge and skill and applied it to becoming Batman, using Wayne Tech and its money to make all of his gadgets, and using the cave below his manor to turn it into a bat cave and work from there, as well as making other bases in Gotham, and eventually adopting Dick Grayson, first Robin, many other Robins after that, even Batgirls and the such. He grows his Bat family over time. That's kind of jumping ahead a bit, and realistically, we just want the origin, so we'll cut it off, say, after he comes back after all this training and becomes Batman. Because, of course, anything after that, realistically, you can just say any outcome is realistic. It could be Batman Beyond, or maybe they all turn into zombies, or God knows. That's why we're going to cut it off at the origin. Of course, if we want to compare Bruce with Absolute Bruce, we're going to have to talk about his parents first. Rather than having a Wayne family fortune to fall back on, Thomas Wayne and Martha Wayne, they just have normal amounts of money. I'm not sure if it was that they met at the cinema where they first saw Zorro, or if it was just that Martha's favorite movie was Zorro. I'll probably put something up here to clear that up. Anyway, it is Martha's favorite movie being Zorro. They got together and they lived in an apartment in Crime Alley, which actually wasn't called Crime Alley in the Absolute Universe. It was called Historical Park Row. It's weird that the street nickname actually got so popular, Crime Alley, that it's what everyone calls it, even though it's not called that legally. Of course, Thomas Wayne still wanted to become a doctor, and Martha was a social worker. But unfortunately, Thomas Wayne couldn't become a doctor as Martha had gotten pregnant. And so as a fallback plan, he became a teacher, so he could still have more time and actually raise his child a little bit more effectively as he grew up, because they didn't have a butler to lean on, because they don't have Alfred in this occasion. They're a regular family living in a regular part of Gotham. They do not have the money for that kind of thing. Obviously, the big change here is that Bruce isn't born into a wealthy family or any of the big money, realistically. But honestly, I would say this is a better outcome, as he's actually being raised by his parents rather than their hired butler, which isn't bad. Alfred is a very good character and a very good father figure for Bruce, but in this occasion, it's probably better that he gets raised by his actual parents. All would be well as Bruce grew. He showed quite a big intelligence. He was very big brain, he had a lot going up in here. He would become friends with a lot of people in his street. That would be Waylon Jones, Oswald Cobblepot, Harvey Dent, and Eddie. Last name. I'm not going to say his last name. It's Edward last name. I can't pronounce it. I fear for my life if I pronounce it poorly. Another one on that list is also Selena Kyle, who would actually grow to love Bruce, and Bruce to her as well. But we're jumping ahead a bit there. At this young age, Bruce had entered a science competition to make a bridge. Said bridge would be used in disasters. It's a deployable one to allow people to escape or just generally use it. And so Bruce heavily worked on it with some support from his father, and he built one themed off of a bat. You can see where this is going a little. This bat bridge was capable of being deployed airily, as it could glide down into the landing zone of wherever the disaster is, and it could fold out. It's very easy, very user-friendly for anyone who wants to use it. Oh, and of course, it can be used defensively for its own normal use and offensively. You can fight with this thing, apparently. Don't know why Kid Bruce wanted to do that. Also, his whole design for it was to strike fear. I don't know about you, but if I was in the middle of a natural disaster or a war zone, and I looked up and I saw this bat thing, this shadow in the sky, in the shape of a giant bat falling down towards us, I wouldn't feel safe. I know that's what he was intending to do, is to scare anyone and be like, look, we've got this big, scary bat thing. Ooh, back away from us. But for the people who are getting it, do they get like a pre-warning that there's this giant bat thing coming down? Like, hey, don't be scared. It's meant to look like that. Also, if you weren't aware about that list of names I had previously given with all those kids, they are all villains, save for baby Selena. She's a 50-50 sometimes. Waylon Jones is usually Killer Croc in the main universe, a man who is born with this condition that slowly turns him into a kind of reptilian human. Oswald Cobblepot is usually born with some birth defects, usually the most prominent one being a long nose, which made his parents kind of hate him growing up, and it was a lot of abandonment issues at that point. And there's also a chance that sometimes he is born with a form of dwarfism, or his height is due to a medical condition, or he just got beaten up way too hard and he just got cranked down to like 3 foot. Harvey Dent, pretty obvious. A lot of people know about Two-Face, but it's just a DA dude, a law guy who sometimes has a multiple personality disorder, falls on some acid or something that burns half of his body off, and his mind breaks and becomes Two-Face. And then the Riddler, Edward, you know his name, Edward, Eddie, the rest. He's usually just insane. Yeah, I hate him in the Arkham games. You know how many puzzles I went through to try 100% that game just to be told, hey, yeah, do it again. I know I don't have to do the riddles again, but play the game again, you get the gold suit. Of course, Selena Kyle, she's always kind of a thief. I think she's almost depicted exactly the same in the Absolute universe. Now, that bridge that he designed that I was talking about before, that bridge that he designed actually won the science contest that he had applied it to. And the prize was to go to a trip to the Gotham Zoo. And of course he did. He brought his friends along with him, plus another kid named Matches. That's more of a story spoiler for the actual series, so I'm not really going to get too much into him. He's just there. We're just going to accept that that kid's there, and we're not going to talk about him. And of course, he also goes there with his father, because they need a parental figure there, of course. And he's a teacher as well, so that's a benefit. But, of course, this is Bruce Wayne. This is a Batman story. So it's not going to go well for the parent now, is it? Joe Chill, if you know about any of the Batman history, Joe Chill is the one that guns down his parents in Crime Alley. Joe Chill rocks up to the zoo. Obviously, the comics haven't actually gotten into why he did what he did, but let's just say he wiped out quite a few innocents and then proceeded to wipe out Thomas Wayne. Thankfully, Thomas Wayne had actually locked all the kids up into a nearby enclosure before he got shot, and that was the bat enclosure. Full of bats. Can you guess which kid got swarmed by bats? And apparently all the other kids just didn't care that he got swarmed by what? Bruce was covered in this like cocoon of bats. And it wasn't just meant to be like of his own mind's representation. This was what happened. He got encased in bats. None of the kids helped him. And then Jim Gordon came in and he could barely realize that there was a kid there. Just this mound of bats mauling this kid. You have great friends, Bruce. You pick them well. And what was even sadder is that before this whole situation happened, his father had promised Bruce that them and their mother are going to go see the Zorro movie, which is, again, his mother's favorite movie, in the cinema after the zoo. And that never happened. So there was still a connection to the Zorro movie. After this, Bruce would deal with his grief and mourning in quite a normal human way. he and Selena would go start stealing stuff. Obviously, she was a great influence to this young Bruce. Along with all the other ones, there's Waylon Jones got into street fighting and like underground tournaments and the such, which I wouldn't say is too bad as long as you're like not ending people. And then Oswald Cobblepot got into the loan shark business. He's still a little bit of a criminal. Harvey Dent actually did quite the opposite. He actually started studying law because he wanted to become the DA. And Eddie, he's just an intelligent dude, but like he's insufferably intelligent. Like he will not stop flexing that he knows something more than you do. And of course, Selena, mentioned before, she kind of just kept doing the same thing that all normal versions of Selena does: steal. Now, here's what's odd, is that eventually, at some point in the comics, he becomes Batman. And we do get to see him, like, training as Batman and all that. But I don't think I actually saw a point where he turned around and said that I don't want to be a criminal anymore, I want to become Batman. That hasn't happened in the comics as far as I'm aware. So, my theory, my comic book theory, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to cut that out. Off, that was cringy. My general theory is that there is a snippet in the comic book which shows Bruce having been arrested and has his photograph taken and all that, which implies that he got caught at some point. And it was a relatively adult picture. I want to say it was a young adult picture. For reference, Bruce Wayne, at the point you start reading the comic book, is around 27 years old. So I want to say he was probably 23, 24 when he got caught. Maybe younger. Why would being caught just generally turn him to the good side? I mean, it might make partial sense, but I imagine he could have been caught before and just gone straight back to it. Well, I imagine that he and Selena robbed a place they probably shouldn't have robbed and got caught pretty majorly. You see, during the comics, Waylon Jones gets pitted against some dude named Bobo, something like that. And Bob's boss is actually Carmine Falcone. Very well-known criminal, usually within the DC universe, and in the Absolute universe, it seems to be the same position. So Carmine Falcone, being this boss, is persuaded with a little bit of an idea of getting money from Selena and Bruce, who tell him, hey, if you let Waylon get to round 7, we can convince him to knock himself out, and you still get the winnings. And so they tell Waylon about this. Waylon goes, hell no. And he beats Bob outright. Because, to be fair, Bruce and Selena had thought that Waylon wasn't even going to get that far, which is a little bit of a rude thing to think about your friend, but it was a realistic thing for them. So my guess is that after that, Carmine wasn't really too happy with Bruce and Selena kind of going back on whatever deal they had. And so Bruce and Selena broke into Carmine Falcone's place. Now, whether that was to steal something or to Carmine Falcone, that's really up to the story, because again, we don't know. But I imagine that they got caught. Carmine didn't get ended. And because of that, Bruce was caught. But I believe Selena wasn't. She probably abandoned Bruce a little bit and skedaddled, which is why during the comic books she's not seen till the more recent ones, because she's on the run, but she's just stealing stuff globally now just for fun. And of course, after this, Bruce probably turns around and goes, I was full well ready to that guy, but I don't think that's the right way to do things. I don't like these criminal lords, but I don't think I should end them permanently. And so he turns around, starts training. First, he would talk to Waylon about a little bit of help training to become better at fighting, even though that's a little bit of a contradictory thing, because in the comics, he teaches Waylon how to fight, so it's weird that he teaches Bruce how to fight. You know what I mean. Oswald probably gave him the in and outs of how crime works a little bit on the street. Of course, not outright saying it, but, you know, how the run of the street works. And of course, Harvey, doing research to become the DA, probably knows a lot about law, so he probably gave him a few crash courses on how to deal with general law. And of course, Eddie's just intelligent, so he probably taught Bruce how to, like, you know, mod a computer or something. I don't know. And of course, after that, Bruce would actually start training outside of that, obviously, to kind of build himself up. But we actually have a list that we can go through of all the stuff he specifically did to train. Of course, I'm going to hold it in front of me because I'm not going to like listed off by memory. He would apply himself for a scholarship in American football, and after getting enough information that I think he did, or building the body that he wanted to, he faked an injury to get out of continuing his scholarship. He also studied other things, such as mechanics, chemistry, criminal psychology, and as well as social culture history. He'd also work at power grids, the water department, sanitation, interned for a bit at the city hall to learn public policy, and finally, the construction job, which he works when we actually read the comic books. This is obviously a big difference from the mainline Bruce Wayne, who traveled globally to learn what he learned. And of course, the money that Bruce Wayne had allowed him to kind of just get whatever he needed. Of course, now with all this knowledge and access to pipelines under Gotham and places that most other people can't get to, Bruce started his war on crime. Now, he kind of was in a beta testing phase for it, as he had a costume that was more accurate towards the first depiction of Batman, which was actually a really good reference. But to fight crime, he would use these vampire plastic teeth, which had a form of sedative, like, liquid in them, so whenever he bit people, they would just fall asleep. And I think he just had claws as well. So, yeah, he wasn't really, like... He made himself look more like a vampire than a bat. Of course, he wasn't too comfortable with that, so he redesigned, he rebuilt, and made the second rendition of his suit, which is not actually the main one yet. It's one that was actually more comic book accurate to the mainline Batman than the one he currently has. I actually really like this design. And because he doesn't have the big money to be able to get all of his gadgets, he just uses an RC and rigs it to... He uses that to stop a gun shipment in a truck, and then proceeds to absolutely whoop everyone who comes out of the truck. And after doing that, he was like, this is what I want Batman to be. This is what I'm going to do. And he made his third rendition of the suit, which is the one with the spikes on the back, and, you know, the big chest symbol and all that. That was his final design. And with that, he would focus in on Carmine Falcone again with this new suit ready to bring him down. But of course, we haven't actually seen him do that in the comic books. It's probably slightly implied that he already did that, because there's the rest of the story after that. But we'll cut it off from that point, because that's kind of where his origin ends. And anything after that is actually just the continuation of the story of the Absolute Batman, which I want to kind of keep spoiler-free, because I do want a lot of people to go read it after this video. It is surprisingly good. But then you're thinking, like, if it's that good, then, like, why this video? This whole video's point is to tell you that Absolute Batman isn't Batman, so why are you glazing it? Well, again, let me continue explaining. Here is the actual differences. Physically, I don't think the right term is facially, but I'm going to say that. Looks-wise, I guess. Costume-wise, gadget-wise, personality-wise, all these things I can point out the differences to and why it feels weird and different. Of course, the physical differences are the most notable, with the mainline Bruce usually standing at around a 6'2" height and has around 210 pounds in weight, which is still pretty heavy for a dude, but in comparison to Absolute Batman, who's 6'9" and double the weight, essentially, yeah, I don't think I have to go too far into that explaining wise. But Bruce, in the mainline series, he's more realistic. That's a body that you could probably achieve with the right diet, with the right workout, and of course, with the right dedication. You could probably get that kind of build. But then you look over at Absolute Batman, this big chunky beast of a man, and you realize that that is not a natural body you could possibly achieve as a human being. 6'9", first off, 420 pounds, second off, and just a tank of a man. That guy could walk through a door. No, scratch that. He could walk through a brick wall like Kool-Aid Man. He's just chilling out there, and you just see Kool-Aid Man Batman just burst through. He's like, "Jesus, forgot the," and puts a slam on you. Of course, there's also the face build, the looks of the Bruce Waynes. Again, this is kind of a notorious topic for anyone who already knows about the Absolute Batman and how he looks. But normal Bruce Wayne, he's usually kept to a handsome standard. They always depict him as being this handsome billionaire playboy who always seems to be perfectly chiseled and doesn't really seem to have any flaws. But that's probably because he needs to maintain his identity as Bruce Wayne. So if Batman breaks his nose, Bruce Wayne has to make sure he gets the right kind of surgeries and recovers properly to ensure that Bruce Wayne doesn't look like he's got a broken nose. And of course, that goes for cuts, scratches, everything on the face. Bruce Wayne needs to make sure is not there. Because one morning he could go out, he could have a bruise up here that he wasn't aware of, and the headlines the next day will be, Bruce Wayne beat by, I don't know, Alfred. It's the only one I could think of. And that would kind of put his identity at a bit of a stake. But then, of course, you got absolute Bruce Wayne, who doesn't actually have to think about that at all because he's just a random dude in the streets. No one really knows him except his friends. And no one on this street would really care. It's Gotham. How many people get beat up every night? They probably just think that he's a victim of Batman who got away pretty scot-free in comparison to the rest. And because of that, he kind of has a odd face shape. He usually has this really big chin, which I think is just to help with the shape of his Batman head. He also has a lot of head, like from like eyebrows up. There's a lot of that. If he looks down, it's just a bold curve on his mask. And then his nose is more dented inwards. If you get a side profile, it's more like a curve, unlike the mainline Bruce Wayne, who has more of a straight or a front curved nose. Of course, I would probably say that this is some form of boxer nose, or of course a past injury as Batman, because you get hit hard enough on the snells right here, whole cartilage broken inwards. That's not an official doctor's thing though. I'm just assuming that that's how that works. And because of that, he doesn't really need to care about his looks. Yeah, so he's going to look different. Everyone pointing out he's a soft baby face. I'll admit, I kind of see that too. I'm not against it, but like, it's a little odd. Now, as for the bat suits, mainline Batman, again, you could pick 3 with similar attributes. They almost all come out to the same kind of design philosophy of bat symbol, some form of dark gray coloring around the torso and legs. You could go all black if you really wanted to. Cape with, you know, the bridge arch kind of cape, make it look like a bat wing, and of course the mask. It all kind of looks the same. It's just differing again in shapes and colors in small amounts. But then the absolute Batman, big, bulky, very sharp. To make a point, points all across here, just all across. There's a lot of points around here. That is called a spike back, and that is very different in comparison to what the normal Bruce Wayne has. And of course, there's also that logo design change in which it's this big, chunky, clunky thing, but that's actually for a reason. There's a lot of actual physical stuff I love. Don't get me wrong, I love the absolute Batman suit after seeing it in action. Design-wise, I was like, eh. But then I saw why it was designed like that, and I'll get into it when I get into the gadgets and stuff, because I classify the rest of it as gadgets. So I do count his cape as a gadget as well, because it helps him glide and such. But I'll talk about that after I finish talking about the gadgets, because I have a nitpick for the cape. Seriously, I love and hate that thing so much. Now, of course, to get into gadgets, I will talk about mainline Bruce. I could try and go over every single thing he's used in the comic books and other media, but that's a lot of things. So I'm just going to give you a rough estimate on what he's usually carrying. And again, I'm pulling up the notes. Of course, he's got batarangs of many different sizes, smoke bombs, and the lollipops that are placed like right beside the smoke bombs, which is very scary because the lollipops are meant for kids. So there's going to be a day where he gives a kid a smoke bomb. Of course, some form of bat cuffs, most likely some bat noculars, a rebreather capable of deep sea use as well as space, shark repellent, and of course his grappling hook. Now there's a lot of items I could be missing generally, but that's because his whole utility belt is like filled with a whole bunch of stuff like lock-picking kits and the such. That, and it could also vary on whatever suit and variation of Batman it is. But thankfully, for the absolute Batman, we actually do have a whole list of items that we can go through, because there is a scene in the comic books in which they go over everything he's carrying, maybe give or take a few items, as Batman's actually pretty good at hiding his stuff. So, for what absolute Batman carries, he carries tear gas pellets, acid pellets, explosive pellets, sedative pellets, hallucinogen pellets, a full lockpick kit, blow darts, finger blades, knuckle blades, toe blades, push daggers, trench daggers, various batarangs, again in different shapes and uses, and one large collapsing axe. His body also contains multiple traps surgically put into him, as well as his suit, and there is like a lockpick stored like up there in his mouth, which is shown off in one of the scenes in the comic book. Now, of course, the other gadget I will talk about is actually his suit, because his suit is full of very practical things that I don't think I've actually seen a lot of other Batmen have. So, of course, we can go and look at his helmet. His helmet, of course, you got the bat ears, right? You know, the big pointy things on the top of his head. So not only can he detach those and use them kind of like a batarang knife as well as just general knives, but he can also, I don't know how, he doesn't even touch his head when he does it. He can pop the side of it out and the whole bat ear points outwards like this. How he looks like a bull with horns just pointing straight at you. And he uses them quite effectively and violently in the comic books, as one would expect. Another thing would be his back spikes. They're not just for decoration. They're actually kind of funny in one of the scenes. You see, they start off with these tiny little spike studs on his back, but he somehow controls them. Again, no explanation of how he uses them, but they can spike out to probably like this length on his back. But his whole back can turn into a porcupine or a sea urchin or, I don't know, puffer fish. But there was one scene in the comic books where some dude got onto his back. He used the spikes in a way where it doesn't like permanently hurt the dude. Of course, it still hurt him, but like he was spiked to Batman's back, and Batman's just carrying this dude around on his back everywhere while he's fighting. And this dude's like, "Sir, could you mayhaps put me down, please? Please, could you put me down, sir, please?" I don't know why. I thought that was hilarious. Now, to get to the point that I said that I hate and love, the cape. God. So normal Batman, his cape is usually just used as a way to protect himself. Sometimes it's bulletproof, and it can help him glide places. That's about the extent of it, though. But because of the way that the Absolute Batman has designed his cape, it actually does a lot more, because the cape is designed off of the bridge that he designed as a kid, which is why he has the gliding capabilities and such. But first things first, gliding? How can this man glide? He's 420 pounds. How is he not dropping from the sky as soon as he tries to glide? But he can. He can apparently glide with the cape. So you've got to think it's a pretty good material. Apparently the material is bulletproof. Sounds kind of heavy. Don't know how he glides with it, but he does. And then he also has these things called bat thumbs. He calls them bat thumbs, at least. And I want to say there's at least 5 of them. 1 straight down the back, 2 kind of like on the side, and the 2 that he can pretty much hold with his hands if he wanted to. They're actually kind of cool. There's a scene where he hooks into a ceiling with them and then uses them to hold himself up, kind of like upside down, like Spider-Man on the ceiling. That was cool. That would imply that they have a lot of weight. They're very well designed, and it would probably, bring him out of the sky still. And at some point, I was like, maybe these are different capes, because throughout the comic books, they change in shape and how much fabric's on them. Sometimes they're like little tendrils realistically, or they're full-blown gliding cape. So maybe I thought maybe he had different types of capes at the ready before he goes out on night patrol. It's the same goddamn cape. There's one comic book where he goes point to point using the cape in every single different way, and he never changes out of it. I hate his cape so much. It is so cool by the amount of multiple functions and creativity that the writers had towards it. But physically, it feels like it makes no sense. But it's a comic book, so I can't complain that much. But why? I feel like I'm doing that bat credit card bit. A bat credit card?
They gave him a bat credit card?
You know the one I'm talking about. Now, we can get into the actual locations and vehicles that he owns. God damn. It's... So normal Batman, obviously, he has the place underneath Wayne Manor Majority, and he has a few bases spread across the place. He's got multiple Batmobiles and multiple Batplanes. There's a lot of vehicles we could go through, but they vary a lot often, and you get the gist of what they're meant to be. But again, we have specific ones we can get into for the Absolute Batman. First off, actually being the Bat dump truck. You heard me right. A Bat dump truck. And the Bat dump truck, I for one, it's very loud. It's very big. Very weird for Batman to have something like that. And then it can transform into a Bat tumbler. Okay. That's reasonable. I mean, I kind of get away with that. I mean, like, it's not like he could drive it into the water and use it like a sea crawler or anything like that, right? What do you think? Why would I mention it if it wasn't there? So not only does he have a sea crawler / bat dump truck / bat tumbler, he also has multitudes of bases across Gotham, which I can actually get with, because it makes sense for him to be able to access all this with his previous jobs and all that. He had a big base up on the top of a tower, and he has multiple underground bases across Gotham, which are in the shape of a bat symbol, his specific bat symbol, which is kind of You know, when I think about it, it doesn't cover a lot of the center of Gotham. So if anyone's about to get jabbed there, it's kind of, he sucks to be you. You should have lived up north in Gotham. That's a pretty heavy spot. Now, my only question is that where does he get all this stuff from? I know that he has like multiple jobs and he's done a lot of studying in multiple places, but I don't think he can afford all this. He has to be stealing this stuff. And I imagine that you could probably get away with stealing a lot of these small things, right? Most of these unnotable things, and just write off something somewhere saying like, oh yeah, no, it just never came in, right? How does he get away with a dump truck? How did he take a dump truck? I can understand chemicals and tiny pieces of metal, maybe some Kevlar, but a dump truck? Hey, Jimmy, I came back to the workplace today, and I can't help but notice that when Bruce was on, he just drove out with a dump truck. What do you mean it's okay? What do you... Defective? Bro, we got that thing like last week. How is it defective? What do you mean bad tire? Right. So how did he drive it out of here if it had a bad tire, huh? Yeah, you're fired, Jimmy. Now, I should probably start talking about the personalities. So, generally, they do have similar, somewhat matching personality. I will say that. So, we can get into the mainline Bruce, right? So, mainline Bruce, he starts off as kind of a grumpy, very reserved Batman who is intending to be as scary as possible. And then over time, he becomes a softer, he's still a bit scary, less grumpy Batman. And just for the sake of keeping it within the same timeline as Absolute Batman, who say that it's young Bruce, who's still grumpy and all that. But comparing it to Absolute Batman, who doesn't really care about cutting off a dude's hand. I mean, normal Bruce, normal Batman would probably do it as well, but I feel like it'd be kind of a last resort way, and if he knows that there's going to be no issues long term for it, like he wouldn't purposely be disabling people. But then Absolute Batman is just freely cutting a dude's hand off, giving him a 50-50 on whether or not he's going to be able to keep it for the long term, which is messed up, but probably not as messed up as Arkham Batman, who is like actively sending a lot of people to the ER. And what's weird is Absolute Batman, whilst very violent as Batman and very aggressive, very easy to kind of like lean in too far on the violence he's inflicting, the Absolute Bruce Wayne is way kinder at the start of his thing. As soon as he's done training as Batman, he goes to the poker night with the boys from Crime Alley, and it's just he's just enjoying life. I mean, he did kind of start talking about some story related stuff at some point when he saw him, but generally he's just seeing them to enjoy their presence. Same goes for like his mother. He goes and sees his mother and starts talking to her just normally. He just wants to enjoy his family, and that's not really something that I would have seen the mainline Bruce do. He kind of pushed himself away from everyone. He tries to push himself away from Alfred, but he's his butler, so he can't really do anything about that. So there's that big difference, is that mainline Bruce and Batman, they can get a little bit dark and they can be very reserved. But then it almost feels like they just cranked it up to 10 on both sides for Absolute Batman. He's way more violent, way more grumpy, and just way more dark as the Absolute Batman, but then he's way more open and just way more kinder as an Absolute Bruce Wayne. It's very jarring of a difference. If Batman from the mainline comics had the chance to, he would throw the Bruce Wayne name and identity into the trash at the start of his career. He just wants the money from it to ensure that he can keep doing what he's doing, and even then if he didn't, he would still find a way to do it. But then you compare that to Absolute Batman, who is more than happy to live Bruce Wayne's life. He treats Bruce Wayne not as a mask or a separate identity. He treats it like himself. The best way I can explain it is that Absolute Bruce Wayne still somehow feels connected to Batman, and Batman still feels connected to Bruce Wayne. But then mainline Batman, he doesn't have any connection to Bruce Wayne. Same goes vice versa. Bruce Wayne doesn't have any connection to Batman. And that's intentional, obviously, by mainline Bruce, because he doesn't want anyone to do it. And it also kind of makes sense for Absolute Batman, because he doesn't really seem to care if anyone learns too much about what he's doing. It feels more like Absolute Batman cares about his identity just less than Spider-Man would, but it feels like that kind of idea that Spider-Man's identity would have. Spider-Man still feels like a Peter Parker, and Peter Parker still feels like a Spider-Man. That's what Absolute Batman feels like. And I don't know why. Now, there's not much I can really do in comparison between the characters before I start really getting into spoiler territory for other characters in the series, and that's not really what we're talking about anyway. So, generally, why do I think that Absolute Batman isn't really a Batman? So, I don't think that he's a bad character. He's an amazing character, and I would say that if I didn't already have this predisposition of what I imagine a Batman to be, I would say he's a good Batman. But I have this predisposition of what Batman is. Batman is this dark creature in the night who takes down crime for justice, and usually does it in a very stealthy way for the small criminals, and for the bigger criminals, he uses these big smart tactics to get them out of the way. And of course, he lives that double life as Bruce Wayne, where he has to keep up his identity of this rich playboy to ensure that no one's suspicious of him or thinks that Bruce Wayne's just fallen off the edge of the earth. But then we look at Absolute Batman, and he's not really a stealthy guy. He does occasionally use stealth, but he's not really built for it. He is more than happy just to walk right up to a criminal and be like, hey, listen, I'm about to break your bones in 15 different places, so yeah, you should probably get ready for that. Like, literally, his whole chest symbol can detach from his chest, and he can use it like an axe. He's a very violent Batman, and he's not very stealthy. Of course, that's even shown through his Batmobile, in which it is just a giant tank rolling through the city. Even Alfred points out that this isn't very stealthy. And of course, he's way more attuned with his Bruce Wayne persona because he doesn't have to keep it up. He's happy being Bruce Wayne. He doesn't have to be this billionaire playboy to hide himself. He's just being Bruce Wayne. He doesn't care. And of course, there's just the general designs and the actions that the characters take. There is a lot that I've already pointed out and compared that kind of shows that there's these big differences between the characters. Now, when I say that he's not Batman, that doesn't mean he's a bad character. I just don't think the title of Batman is right for him. He feels like a separate character in its entirety. Absolute Batman and Bruce Wayne, they don't act like Batman. They don't seem like Batman. They don't seem like their own Bruce Wayne. So I feel like I just wouldn't give him the title of Batman. But of course, for the obvious reasons, publishing, they have to call him Batman because how else do you know it's a Batman story? You kind of have to call him Batman if you're going to be selling him as Batman. But I don't know what I would name him. Would I call him the Absolute Bat? It's just the title of Batman. The best way I can describe it is that this Batman is built for vengeance, while the mainline Batman's built for justice. I would argue that I like Absolute Batman more than I like mainline Batman. But the title of Batman just doesn't feel right for him. Call him the Dark Knight, if you wish. Call him the Bane Bat. Call him the hulking shadow or whatever. But just Batman feels underwhelming for him now. My whole video kind of went off the idea that I wouldn't want to call this guy Batman. And I still wouldn't want to call this guy Batman. And there will be a lot of people in the comments who will say that he is Batman, by name, by title, and everything. And that's perfectly fine. I would just that if you do say that, don't say something like, you're dumb, his name's Batman, so he's Batman. Give me a reason for why you would still call him Batman. Give me a paragraph of why you would consider him a Batman still. Make it constructive. Don't just nuh-uh me. Don't nuh-uh me. The comment's going to be filled with nuh-ahs. I'm going to regret that immensely. But of course, some people may also agree with me that this guy just doesn't feel like Batman. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't read it. Go ahead and read it. It's an amazing series, and I can't wait for the issue to release on November 12th. Seriously. I want to see what the final outcome is for the story, and again, I'm not going to spoil it for anyone watching it as to what's happened so far, but it's just... The way that the writers have done it is that they've rewritten the story using the same elements from like mainline Batman, but reworking them creatively to turn them into something completely new. Small spoiler, I'm going to get into one thing. Arkham, right? Arkham Asylum. It's meant to be this place where you store all these insane people. They worked on just making them more insane, more or less, and doing a whole bunch of experiments on them. But then in the Absolute universe, they go into this explanation of how there's this thing where some dude's building a whole bunch of arcs, and they go in order of Arc A, Arc B, Arc C, etc., using the alphabet, until they build one in Gotham called Arc M. Arkham. It sounds stupid, but it's actually really cool. And It's just this big underground city underneath Gotham where they're doing a whole bunch of tests in relation to characters that are also in the main line, but they do these twists on them. And it's really neat. You got to read the comic book. Like, I regret not reading it as soon as it came out, but I also don't regret not reading it because that means I got to read a whole bunch of it in one sitting rather than having to wait. But you get my point. But of course, that's more of a rambly topic that I wanted to get into. This video didn't get as structured as I would have imagined, but that was probably because I only really had a week to work on this. Over the last week, I had been house sitting and the such. It was still a little bit of recovering. If you like this video, feel free to subscribe because I try to upload one every 2 weeks. It's a little bit iffy because I keep getting pulled into other stuff in real life. But if you like the video, subscribe. And while you're down there, hit the like button. It helps the channel and the video reach more people. Big thanks for everyone who watched the previous video related on Batman. That did really well, thank you. And of course, again, not sponsored. Thank you to my members, Tina Buttercup, Crystal Kensbit, Jasmine Wilson, and Wilberflight.